that he took it too far, especially that night? Obviously, he didn't really piss in the ring, but you never know. He may have really done it if you didn't run out, or if the situation was a little bit different. You ever think that he took it too far?
I think he tap danced right along that line, which makes the character that so much more compelling. I mean, we're sitting here in 2018 talking about something from 1996, 22 years ago. So it's hard to separate those two and put yourself completely back in that mindset. But I do remember vividly me thinking to myself, what's he doing? Why is he pushing this far? And, like the old saying in the business goes, if you can work the boys, you can sure as hell work the fans. But none of us will ever know exactly how much of that was the real Brian Pillman, how much of that was a work, how much of it was a shoot. Did he push too far, not far enough? Those are things, because he's no longer with us, that none of us will ever be able to answer, other than just based off of the acumen that we have in the industry. And looking back at what Brian Pillman did in 96, keeping in mind that nothing like this had ever been done in wrestling before, especially in the advent of the big three companies. It was so cutting edge, so far beyond its time, that it had to work. There was no way. On that night, if you were watching it, if you were a big Brian Pillman fan and didn't believe that he was a loose cannon, I would dare say that at some point thereafter, you did buy into it. And saying that, I would dare say that most of the people in the building, if not all of them, believed it that night. Because for me as a performer, playing off of it, it was damn believable. So, like I said, we'll never get to that answer because Brian Pillman's gone. But when you watch what he delivered and put down on video for us to watch forever, it was so far beyond its time and so special that you scratch your head today watching it. And if you didn't have me to be able to say, this is what was going on in the backstory, it would be very easy for you to fall into, he's buying into his character too much. He's taking it too far. I also think that Brian, in a very large way, because we had worked so much together previous to this, knew that my character would play off of that in a very strong way, had to play off of that in a very strong way. I couldn't just go out and, sort of half-ass it and say, gee golly whiz, Brian, why are you going to whip your Johnson out? You had to play it so strongly, straightforwardly, that it almost guaranteed that it would be played out the way that he saw it in his head. And to me, that is a stamp of approval on the way that I responded to it, because otherwise, had he not trusted me to respond to that in that way, my guess is that Brian would have said to me before, hey, by the way, I'm thinking about doing this or that, just be ready for it. That he didn't do that he didn't give me that heads up, tells me that he trusted my character to play off his character and what his character was doing in the ring as realistically and believable as if it were a shoot. And so, that in and of itself, I think, speaks more for Brian's view of what he was doing and his believing in what he was doing. And it plays out on video to a T.
With him, I think one of the crazy things is you'll hear a story from Jim Ross or Blue Meanie or a bunch of really smart guys that have been in and around the business for years, and they'll say Pillman pulled him off the side and whispered it's just a work, I'm working, and then he would do something crazy again, and they would think to themselves, oh, wait a second, he's working me by saying that it's a work. He legitimately is crazy. It's like one of those people where you say a really mean joke, somebody's like, oh, I'm joking. And then you say it again. It's like the person's like, wait a second. Are they joking? Are they joking, or do they really mean it? Isn't that just like the ingenious part of him? Even when he said he was working, people were like, "No, you're not. You're crazy." And then they'll be like, "Wait a second, maybe he is working." Isn't that just a part of like the mastermind that he was? That even a smart guy like Jim Ross or a really smart guy like Blue Meanie just sitting there thinking to themselves like, "Wait, you said you were working me, but were you working me?" Like, you know what I mean? That confusion factor.
Sure. I mean, look, I can sit here today and say, I knew when I threw the NWA title down, I was going to work. I didn't. I was hoping, and I had a pretty good feeling that it would, but I didn't know for certain. And like I've told the fans this past weekend in Knoxville and ever since, had it not, I might be a footnote in the industry. The fact that Brian Pillman was that sure of what he was doing was going to work, and that he was willing to go that extra step to try to work Jim Ross or Blue Meanie or whoever in the back, tells me that he had a much deeper belief in what he was doing and was able to play it out in a much further distance than I could, or that I would have been willing to at that point. To me, I go back and I watch that footage of Brian and all the things he did, from holding the baby up from the chair shot to the I'm going to piss in the ring to the jumping into Harry Boatswain's arms, all of it in ECW as just a freeze frame in time was so eloquent from a standpoint of working it, that it really does. For those of us in the business, when we hear coming up in the business, you have to learn to tell a story, kid. You got to work it. And, all those different, find a way to be different. All those little cliches you hear from all the old timers. Brian Pillman had that down in spades, and you can see it. You don't take my word for it. You can see it in going back and taking what we're talking about tonight and watching that video and seeing how truly special what he was doing on camera was, how forward thinking, how certain of the outcome he was. And I'm sure that he had gone to the pains that he did to make that angle what it was, that he had a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D, that if it didn't work, how would he play off of it? He had thought this down to the minutia and portrayed it so believably and so realistically that it tells me that he must have had a plan B and a plan C and a plan D in mind if it didn't work.